That was an unexpected ending. My goodness. How are you today, church? Good. Today, you may not realize it, but today is a very important day. Every November, first Sunday in November, I believe it is the International Day of Prayer for the persecuted church. You know, we have it so easy in many ways here in the United States. We get up in the morning, we come to church, we worship freely. But in many countries, that's not the case. Some of the countries you've come from, that's not the case. There are people out there who are trying to worship God, and because of the political standpoint of the country, or maybe the population, or the beliefs of the population, they don't have that opportunity. And oftentimes they suffer for their belief. They suffer because they dare to have the audacity to worship Christ, to worship God. So we take this day every year to pray for the persecuted church. Pray for those who are suffering for their beliefs. So let's take a moment to do that. Father God, we want to thank you for your saints around the world. We want to thank you for your believers, many of whom are in terrible situations, who have suffered beatings, have suffered loss of jobs, loss of family. Some of them who have been tortured, who have been maimed. Some of them who even end up losing their lives for it, just because they love you, just because they were willing to follow you. Lord, I ask your special mercies today on them, your special touch of grace, that you will fill them, Lord, today with your Spirit as they gather to worship you like we're worshiping you. And through the hard times that may be there, Lord, I just pray that you give them peace. That you give them a holy contentment that comes from loving you, no matter what their circumstances are. Lord, I ask that you would be with them today and lift them up and help them to feel the love and the prayers, Lord, of the brothers and sisters across the globe. In Christ. Speaking of persecution, but on a much lower scale, in September of this year, the 25th, a man by the name of Mike Davis died at the age of 85. Now, you may not have heard of Mike Davis, also known as Tiger Mike. But according to an article in the New York Times, Tiger Mike was possibly the world's grumpiest boss. Absolutely grumpiest boss. Now, some of you work, you have jobs, etc., and you may have a boss that you might think is a little grumpy. This guy takes grumpiness, or took grumpiness to a whole new level. These are just three of the memos that he wrote his employees. He started out as a chauffeur, ended up becoming a Houston oil and gas magnate. But he did not tolerate anything in his office that he considered, not what he considered good. So, for instance, on January 11th, 1978, he sent the following to his employees, a memo. Idle conversation And gossip in this office among employees will result in immediate termination, and in capital letters. Do your jobs and keep your mouth shut. Okay. A month later, he banned office birthday parties with the following memo: there will be no more birthday celebrations, birthday cakes, levity, or celebrations of any kind within the office. This is a business office. If you have to celebrate, do it after office hours on your own time. And in another memo, where he was explaining to his employees they could not swear, even though he swore, he said, I swear, but since I'm the owner of this company, that's my privilege. And this privilege is not to be interpreted as the same for any employee. That differentiates me from you. And I want to keep it that way. There will be absolutely no swearing by any employee, male or female, in this office, ever. Okay, I agree that no swearing in the office is a good thing, but how would you like to deal and go day by day under a grumpy boss? A guy who is always bringing you down, always looking over your shoulder, always pointing out any of your faults. Would you be content to work there? Or would you be looking for another job? Would you be content to stick it out? Our memory verse today is Philippians 4:12. Paul is saying, I know what it is to be in need. I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. In other words, this means that if Paul had worked for Davis, he would be content. How? How could he be content? I question, how could people in the persecuted church, and many of them, if you read their testimonies in Voice of the Martyrs or anything else, they will say that they've gone through all this hard stuff, but they're very content to be exactly where God wants to be. How? How is that possible with all these circumstances, with all this pain, with all this suffering, with all this criticism, with all this pressure on them? You see, they, like Paul, discovered a secret that we're going to look at in a little bit. But first, we're going to look at what actually contentment means. What is it? What isn't it? Why is it so hard to hold on to? And how do we learn to actually live in it? To start us off, what isn't contentment? Well, contentment, first of all, is not what we say, happiness, bubbliness, joy, whatever. That's not contentment. With contentment, you may have some happiness. Don't get me wrong. You may be happy at times being content. But that's really not what contentment's all about. See, contentment means basically satisfied. I am satisfied with where I am right now. Whether in life, whether in my circumstances, whatever. I realize I have a purpose here. This is where I am. And I'm content with that. I'm okay with that. That doesn't mean bad things are not going to happen to me. That doesn't mean that I am going to have loss. Not have loss. But I'm content to be where I am right now. Whether we have a little or we have a lot. That ability to be satisfied or at peace, though, unfortunately, doesn't always last long for some of us. In fact, if I were to ask you right now, are you content with your life? I wonder what kind of response I would get. You see, the thing is that contentment, we're rarely satisfied for long things. In fact, studies have been done that have shown that where they go and they research and they ask people, no matter the income level, whether they have $30,000 a year, $60,000 a year, $250,000 a year, even millionaires. They've done studies and they've asked them, well, are you satisfied? Are you content with your income right now? And the overwhelming response is, yeah, not really. I think if I only had about 10% more, I would be good. But the thing is, they did follow-up studies, and you know what? Even when these people got 10% more, they still weren't satisfied. They always wanted, if I could just have about 10% more. Satisfaction, being content, it's really hard. In fact, contentment can be elusive. Contentment can be elusive. I saw this truth in action actually on Friday. Sasha and I had to spend some time tag teaming and babysitting 5 of my grandchildren. My daughter Katie has 5 children under 5 years old. Yeah, 2 of them are twins. 5 children under 5 years old. Brad had to get out and he had to go to an eye doctor's appointment. So Sasha and I tag team, went in there and took care of the children for a little over an hour. I guarantee you something, I have new respect for my son-in-law. I really do. His wife, Katie, she's got a job in the city, and Brad is a stay-at-home dad. And I have new respect for what he puts through. Don't get me wrong, I love my grandchildren. But that age is interesting. Especially when you have all 5 of them together. Because, quite frankly, contentment is extremely elusive. No, it's mine. No, he's touching me. No. Okay? I had one of the twins, Alex, he's crying. I'm trying to comfort him. He's in his little swing. The bottle is being prepared. And I'm moving it back and forth, and batteries don't work in this little swing. And I'm moving it back and forth, and it goes for a little bit. Then, and all this kind of stuff. Finally, we get the bottle, and I get Alex in my arms, and I put the bottle in his mouth. And Axel, sorry. You know all the names of children. Axel. I have Axel in my arms, and he's drinking this milk in his eyes. You know, just getting that contentment look, right? But after a little while, there's a little bubble or something like that. No, we're not as content anymore. And then I put him down, and I know that in just a little bit, he'll be fine for a little while. But pretty soon, discontentment will come back up. It's a part of life, right? It's a part of life. We have needs, we have things go wrong, and we become discontented. It seems that we are only really content when things are going well for us, not when things are not going well for us. We get discontented when times are tough. The children of Israel were wandering in the wilderness, right? And kind of wondering, what am I going to eat? What am I going to drink? It's not as readily available. And we see in Exodus 16, 2 through 3, this response. In the desert, the whole community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The Israelites said to them, if only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted, but you brought us out into this desert to starve this entire assembly to death. Let's pretend they're Jewish New Yorkers. But I mean, you hear that? You know, this I'm going to die. We're going to die. Why did we leave Egypt? Etc. So we get discontent when times are tough. We get discontent when we're bored. Anybody been bored here? Some of you say, I'm bored now. But you get bored, right? And you get discontented. Exodus 32, 1 through 5. Moses has been gone for a while. The people are bored, quite frankly. They don't know where he is. They don't know why he's on the mountain so long. And so they say, when the people saw that Moses was so longing coming down from the mountain, they gathered around Aaron and said, come, make us gods who will go before us. As for this fellow Moses who brought us up out of Egypt, We don't know what has happened to him. Aaron answered them, take off the gold earrings that your wives, your sons, and your daughters are wearing, and bring them to me. So all the people took off their earrings and brought them to Aaron. He took what they handed him and made it into an idol cast in the shape of a calf, fashioned it with a tool. Then they said, these are your gods, Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt. No. In fact, I really admire the patience of God, quite frankly. I can just see one of those zots, the lightning bolt and striking Aaron right then. I mean, but, bored, discontented. We get discontent when we're scared. The children of Israel, once again, they had come to the promised land. They sent spies in there. Spies came back and said, they're big, the giants were like ants in their eyes, etc. Numbers 14, 1 through 4. This was the response. That night, all the members of the community raised their voices and wept aloud. All the Israelites grumbled against Moses and Aaron, and the whole assembly said to them, if only we had died in Egypt or in this wilderness. Why is the Lord bringing us to this land only to let us fall by the sword? Our wives and children will be taken as plunder. Wouldn't it be better for us to go back to Egypt? And they said to each other, we should choose a leader and go back to Egypt. And that happens a lot, doesn't it? We get discontent, and our first response is, I want to leave. I want out of this situation. I'm discontented. And I deserve to be contented. So, I want out. And then we get discontent when we hit roadblocks in life. Things are not going our way. Joshua did not understand why, we found out later why, but doesn't understand why the people of Israel, as they're taking over Canaan, they get defeated at one point. And in Joshua 7, 6 through 8, this great man of God, then Joshua tore his clothes and fell face down to the ground before the ark of the Lord, remaining there till evening. The elders of Israel did the same and sprinkled dust on their heads. And Joshua said, alas, sovereign Lord, why did you ever bring this people across the Jordan to deliver us into the hands of the Amorites, to destroy us? If only we had been content to stay on the other side of the Jordan. Pardon your servant, Lord. What can I say now that Israel has been routed by his enemies? We get discontent when things don't go our way, when we see roadblocks, and we're wondering what's going on. In fact, unfortunately, our society, our very society is really good at fostering discontentment, right? It's excellent. You look at the advertising that says, oh, you need this new car. You need this new set of clothes. You need this, you need that. My son-in-law, when he went to get glasses and to get his prescription changed, of course it wasn't the regular glasses. Oh no, the styles have changed. The styles have changed. So new frames. You have to have new frames. And you have to have new lenses. You have to have, it's all about new, better, improved, whether it's better improved or not. They did a study with preschool children. They took the preschool children and they put them in a room and they took identical food, like chicken nuggets. And some of the chicken nuggets they wrapped in just regular wrapping. And the others they put in McDonald's wrapping. Guess which one the kids preferred? The McDonald's ones. Oh, it didn't matter what they put in there. They could put carrot sticks. They put milk. As long as it had the McDonald's label on it, every kid was like, I like that one. Really? Because we've created this society that says you cannot be satisfied with the ordinary. You have to have something else. You have something bigger, better, more expensive. Right? We breed discontentment. But the thing is, what we really need to learn about contentment is that contentment is not dependent on circumstances. Contentment is not dependent on your circumstances. It doesn't mean that because I am, only of this income level that I should be discontent. I don't mean that we should not try to improve in many ways, get a better education, maybe get a better job to provide better for the family. I'm not saying that. What I am saying that even as we move upwardly mobile, we need to be content where we are at the moment. We need to not be so focused on saying, I don't have this, and instead be thankful for what we do. Be content with where we're placed at the moment. Because it's not about name brands. It's not even about quantity. It doesn't matter how much money you have. Money can't buy you contentment. Ecclesiastes 4:8. There was a man all alone. He had neither son nor brother. There was no end to his toil. Yet his eyes were not content with his wealth. He had a lot of money. He'd made a lot of money. He worked hard for it. He had it. And he says, for whom am I toiling? He asked. And why am I depriving myself of enjoyment? This too is meaningless. A miserable business. Remember the rich young ruler? Rich young ruler, he had all this money. And he'd come to Christ and he's asking Christ, he says, what must I do to inherit the kingdom of God? What must I do? And Jesus told him, things that, how to follow things in the commandment of God. He says, well, I've done all these since I was a kid. He says, well, one thing you lack, take your money, take your possessions, sell it, give it to the poor, and follow me. And he went away what? He went away sad. Because the possessions meant so much to him. But even those possessions, guess what? He still wasn't content with it, right? He still realized there was an emptiness. He still realized he needed something more. But he couldn't give up the other. You might say, well, it's friends or family that make me contented. But the thing is, friends and family, as wonderful as they are, they're not always going to be. People die. People move on. Life happens. They will not always be with us, nor can they satisfy our deepest longings. It's not about having the perfect job or fame or all the toys in life. In fact, nothing on this earth can truly satisfy us forever. King Solomon, for all his faults in life, understood this all too well. He had everything. Right? The Bible says that he had all the wealth. He had respect. He had 1,000 wives and concubines. He had male and female servants. If you read the book of Ecclesiastes, he was going after all these different things. He had tried knowledge, tried the arts, he tried all the different kinds of enjoyments you could have, and yet nothing ever satisfied him. And this is what he wrote in Ecclesiastes 1, 2 through 11. He says, meaningless, says the teacher. Utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. What do people gain from all their labors at which they toil under the sun? Generations come and generations go, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun sets and hurries back to where it rises. The wind blows to the south and turns to the north. Round and round it goes, ever returning on its course. All streams flow into the sea, yet the sea is never full. The place the streams come from, there they return again. All things are wearisome. More than one can say, the eye never has enough of seeing, nor the ear its fill of hearing. What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There's nothing new under the sun. Is there anything of which one can say, look, this is something new? It was here already, long ago. It was here before our time. No one remembers the former generations, and even those yet to come will not be remembered by those who follow them. And if you look at our society today, even with the new things, they all pass away. they don't satisfy. This was written, what, thousands of years ago. It still remains the truth. Nothing in this world will satisfy us, will keep us content for long. Maybe for a little while, maybe for a moment, but not for long. We think the grass is somehow greener on the other side of the fence. There's a guy who decided he looked around at his neighbors and he saw they were all living in nicer houses, more luxurious houses than he had. And he decided, well, I'm going to put my house on the market, I'm going to sell it, and I'm going to trade up. I'm going to buy something even better. And so he contacts a realtor, says he's going to sell his house, says list it, etc. A few months later, he's looking in the paper and he sees this ad for this house. It sounds great. It's wonderful. It has everything he wants and everything. And so he calls up a realtor and he says, hey, I'm interested in this house. I want to go look at it. I want to see what it is. And the realtor started asking him some questions about it. And finally the realtor said, but sir, what you're describing, this is your house. You're describing your own house. The ad you saw was for your own house. You see, we think the grass is greener, but it's not necessarily. We need to see that contentment, ultimately, contentment's a choice. We choose whether to be contented or not. And it all comes down to basically our perspective. You've seen it in the illustration countless times of the glass, half full or half empty. How do you see it? Do you see the glass as half empty? Oh, man, I need more. Are you grateful that it's half full? Are you grateful that you've got something that has been given to you? One way to help is to really begin to look, to count your blessings, begin to look for something to be thankful for. There's a guy by the name of Arthur Anders who made the news. He's a supervisor in an in-school suspension program in Ruston, Louisiana. But recently, on this fairly meager salary that he makes, he made a deposit at the bank of $5,136.14. Wow, that's pretty good, for his salary. Kind of a nice bonus, right? But where did the money come from? You see, for the last 45 years, Arthur Anders has been looking down as he's walking forward and picking up pennies that are lost or dropped on the ground. You see them all the time, right? You see a penny on the ground. How many of you take the time to stop, bend down, pick up a penny? You just walk on. That's a penny. I've seen people take pennies, throw them. That's just a penny. But Arthur Anders, for 45 years, walked along, grabbed pennies, and put them in 5-gallon jugs. He saved up 15 5-gallon jugs of pennies, took them to the bank, and took the bank 5 hours in their coin counting machine to finally come up with the $5,136.14. Okay? But beyond the $5,136.14, which is a nice thing, you know what really Anders is thankful for? This is what he said. He said, it was the God-given incentive reminding me to always be thankful. He said there'd be days that I would forget to pray. And I'd be walking along, and invariably on those days, I would look down, and there was a penny. And it would remind me to be thankful for what God has given me, for what God provides for me. In essence, to be content. To be content and to be thankful for what God has done. Life is not smooth sailing. You've probably discovered this, right? It's not smooth sailing. It's filled with ups and downs. It's filled with love. It's filled with loss. But our attitude makes a difference. This is what Paul has discovered for himself, as we saw in our memory verse earlier in Philippians 4:12. We're going to look at that again. He says, I know what it is to be in need. And I know what it is to have plenty. In other words, I've got these things. I've been poor, and I've had a lot. I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living plenty or in want. And you think about Paul's life. This guy, he was beaten. He was thrown in prison. He was shipwrecked. He was left for dead. He had so many things that had bad happen to him. And yet, how? What is this in all things, in any and every situation, secret that Paul is referring to? What he's referring to is this. What he discovered is that true contentment is only found in God. True contentment is found only in God. What God offers us through our relationship with Him is more than enough for us. But the fact is we become discontented because we rarely strive to get close enough to Him to really grasp it. Pastor Timothy Keller gave an illustration about a boy who with a broken truck. A little boy with a broken truck, a little toy truck. And he comes to his daddy and says, "Daddy, fix it! Daddy, fix it!" And Daddy, instead of fixing the truck, says, "Don't worry about the truck. There's this distant relative of ours who died, and he mentioned you in his will. You've inherited $100 million. And the little kid, "Daddy, fix the truck! Daddy, fix the truck!" Why? Because the little boy doesn't have the cognitive ability, really, to realize that $100 million, you could hire a factory to fix your truck. Right? You could buy lots of new ones. But he doesn't understand. All he sees is the moment. And you and I, unfortunately, many times are like that spiritually. We're so focused on what we don't have or what's going on around us, we don't realize the spiritual riches that we have in Christ. We don't realize that there's so much deeper stuff there that can totally enrich our lives and make that little inconvenience seem like nothing if we will only embrace it. If we will only seek out the depths of God. If we will only try to be all that we are called to be in God. And to live like children of the King. God can give us true contentment. But we have to search for it. We have to grasp for it. We have to renew our minds. I love how David expresses this in Psalm 16, 5-6. He says, "Lord, you alone are my portion and my God. You make my lot secure. The boundary lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. Surely I have a delightful inheritance." This is a metaphor about the children of Israel inheriting. But his words here are so deep. Because he's saying, you know what? You are my portion. God, you are my God. I'm content with my lot in life. What you've set around me, the boundary lines that you've set around me, they've fallen in pleasant places for me. I have a delightful inheritance. I'm happy where you put me. Even though it may not be as big as somebody else's, even though it may not be as pretty as somebody else's, I'm content because you are my portion. You are my God. Can you say that about God? Is God your portion? Is God your cup? Are you so satisfied with Him that all those other inconveniences in life are just minor things? You know, David Life wasn't always easy for David, was it? No. It wasn't easy for Paul. But both men grasped that true contentment takes effort, takes a change of attitude, and it takes turning toward the only one who can give it. Christ was the perfect model of true contentment. His life was not easy on earth, right? But he was content to do the will of the Father. He was content to go to the cross. Doesn't mean he enjoyed it. It doesn't mean he enjoyed the pain of it. But he was content in his relationship with God, his Father. Our question for us here then is, do we have the courage to be content? Because it does take courage. Do we have the courage to be content if God leads us to step out in faith and away from our comfort zones? Do we have the courage to do that? Do we have the courage to stand up to the world's expectations? Instead, be different. To be Christ-like. Do we have the courage to ignore the lure of something better and instead trust God to provide what's best for us? Yes, contentment is elusive and it's temporary when we try to find it on our own. But if we learn to dig deeper into our relationship with God, we will discover its riches and discover that it's more than enough for us. We're about to have a time of communion. A time when we can celebrate that relationship with God. A time for believers to say, this is who I am. I have committed to following Jesus Christ. I've committed to making Him Lord of my life. But it's also a time of confession. It's a time of confession where you say to God, Lord, I've been guilty of not being content. I've been guilty of not searching for the depths of life in you. I've been guilty of not seeking you with all of my heart and instead focusing on all the circumstances around me. And Lord, I want to change that. So in this communion today, why not draw close to Him?